Hi, my name is Bruce Young. I'm director and producer of the documentary Eye of the Pangolin. After most screenings of the film, we try and be available to answer any questions about the animal and the crisis that it's facing. Unfortunately, we can't be with you this time, but we've put together a list of some of the most common questions that we get and our answers to them. The short answer is motivation. When you put a price on the head of an animal that is more than the average rural African will earn in a year, and you've got people who know the area and the behavior and movements of all the wildlife in that area, it stands to reason that they will inevitably be able to find even the most elusive animal if they're motivated. Also, the crime syndicates who are buying the scales from the poachers or buying the animals from the poachers are sophisticated, highly organized, and totally ruthless. They know exactly how best to exploit the situation in rural Africa. Pangolins are extremely endangered. When you take into account the numbers of animals and tonnage of scales that are being retrieved from the trade every year, and then compare that with the average reproduction rate of the pangolin, then you realize that the situation around the pangolin is just not sustainable at all. One of the most telling personal stories, though, that brought this home to me was talking to a Cameroonian while I was doing the research for this film, who's involved in the conservation of pangolins. He told me that he'd grown up in a rural area where pangolins were regularly seen in the forest in Cameroon or in the bushmeat trade markets where he lived. And now, 25, 30 years later, when he goes home to that area, there are no pangolins. They are not in the bushmeat trade. They are never ever seen. So they have totally disappeared from this particular area where this guy grew up. So that for me is indicative of how extremely endangered these animals actually are. For their scales and for their meat. The scales are used for traditional Chinese medicine remedies, and the meat is sold in exotic wildlife restaurants, mostly in Vietnam, but in China as well. A bowl of pangolin stew can go from anything from $1,500 to $3,000 per plate. The pangolin scales are dried and ground up into a powder, and then they're sold in tiny amounts which are added to drinks or food as remedies for 80 to 100 various ailments. It's also sold by Chinese traditional medicine practitioners as a cure for cancer. Traditional Chinese medicine has worked for millions of people over thousands of years. But there is no scientific proof that ground up pangolin scales have any healing value whatsoever. The scales are made up of keratin, which is the same substance as our fingernails or rhino horn. Most pangolin conservationists and experts will tell you that pangolins do not survive well, if at all, in captivity, and certainly do not breed with any real success in captivity. But there have been a number of operations discovered going as research projects, Chinese operations in both China and Africa, where they are attempting to set up a facility to supply the traditional Chinese medicine market. In 2017, approximately 50 pangolins were taken from Togo in Africa and given to a number of United States zoos in an attempt to study them, raise them in captivity, and breed them in captivity. Most of those pangolins have subsequently died, and there's been no reports recently of any success at all with their attempts to breed and raise them in captivity. This film took about 2 years to make, from the time that Johan first came to us with the idea to make a film about pangolins, and we finally released it on Endangered Species Day on the 17th of May 2019. Pangolins exist in some pretty remote places in Africa, And traveling to those areas, to those forests, was one of the more grueling aspects of this particular film. A lot of the roads in Africa leave a lot to be desired. Looking for the giant ground pangolin in Gabon was also a very, very tough operation, and as you saw, we never actually found one. It's estimated that about 1 million pangolins have been taken from the wild in the last 10 years. That equates to about 20 tons of scales per year, which works out roughly to about 1 pangolin being taken every 5 minutes. At that rate, these animals won't be around for much longer. How can you get involved? You can tell people about the animal, you can share our film, you can tell them about the crisis that this beautiful creature is facing right now, and you can go to our website, www.Pangolin.Africa, and on the campaign page there are a number of options for you to get actively involved in helping to conserve the African pangolin. Thank you.